Good morning and welcome to the final day of MPTS Connect. We've had a fantastic couple of days and we've got a programme bursting full of content today. Welcome if you haven't been with us so far. We hope you enjoy what you see, and welcome back to those that have been with us the last couple of days. If you haven't been with us, just a quick couple of notifications. We've got 77 virtual exhibitors ranging all sorts of production equipment services, from cloud to camera technology to post. So please do take the time throughout the day to go and visit our virtual exhibitors and contact them and to see what they're up to. Also, you'll notice we've got chat boxes. The chat boxes are great to say hello and make connections. But if you are going to have one-to-one chats, if you could take that to the one-to-one chat facility where you click on the person's name, check profile, and then you can go to a private one-to-one direct messaging service. There's also the speed networking, I nearly said dating, but speed networking facility where you can bump into people and have chats, connect with people that you haven't seen for a while or new people and make new connections. So there's lots going on even when the sessions are going on. So please do make the most of everything that we've got on offer. Now this morning, our first session, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Gordon Buchanan MBE, Scottish filmmaker. And he's going to be talking to us about some of his projects, recent projects, impact of COVID, technology, and his passion for conservation. Here's a quick video showcasing Gordon's passion for wildlife filmmaking and conservation. Will you play the video, please?
Just one image would prove they live up here and could help secure their future. Gordon's camera traps are the team's last hope.
Oh, look at this bear. Oh, sniffing the camera. The camera traps aren't always invisible. He's a really healthy specimen as well. You'd have to be living up here. It's going to get cold. It's going to have to work hard. It's only this strong to survive. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh. Oh, I don't believe it. Oh God. Oh. Thank you. Oh gosh. Okay, they're here. You know, it's only one tiger, but the fact that they can live here is just so important, not just for this one individual, but for tigers in the wild for the future. It's just, oh man. Just walked along this path, literally down this path. If he was just passing through this area, he would have been on through. But what he's doing, he's scent marking quite high up on the rock. And what he's saying is, this is my place. This is where I live. Finding tigers here is phenomenal, because what it does, it just shows that almost every square mile from here down to India is potential tiger habitat.
Such a powerful clip, and I would really like it if you could give a big virtual round of applause as we welcome Gordon to our screen. Morning, Gordon.
Morning, how you doing?
Oh, good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. In that clip, I had the lockdown hair kind of way ahead of time.
Busting the curls. So obviously we can all see from all of your programs your passion for conservation, animals, wildlife. The C word, COVID, has had an enormous impact on everybody in so many different ways, and in production no more so. But as studios can get back together in a COVID safe environment, obviously natural history filmmakers like yourself have been very much grounded.
Yeah.
So what impact has that had on you both personally and for any projects you had in the pipeline?
Yeah, it's interesting from my perspective, because my work largely relies on me traveling around the world. I kind of, I didn't anticipate sort of, at the very start with COVID, I thought, well, surely I'm not going to be stopped in my tracks. But we were, I was literally, it was early March last year, and it was the night before I was going to Australia for a month. And things were kind of escalating, and then I got a call about sort of nearly midnight from the series producer, said, "Don't leave. We're pausing the trip." And I thought at that point, okay, well, they'll probably review that in the next couple of days, and then I'll be off to Australia. But pretty much, and then within a week to 10 days, it was full lockdown, and one by one, all of those jobs that I had on last year just kind of disappeared overnight. And I suppose that's the thing with wildlife filmmaking. It's by and large, most of it is working in foreign locations, and if you can't travel, you can't work. For one project, it wasn't such a big problem because we thought we could just push all the trips to the end of the year. But for other projects, it was like, right, I was working in South Africa, and we couldn't get back there. So it was, kind of just initially, I thought I'm just going to make the best of a bad situation. And one thing that I have a shortage of is time at home. So, for the first half of last year, it was, for me personally, it was actually, it was an opportunity to do all the things at home and spend time with my family that I wouldn't ordinarily have, and then just kind of see how things panned out.
Have you had enough of that now?
I think my wife's had enough of that now. I kind of attacked last year kind of in a really kind of positive way and thinking, okay, I don't know how long I'm going to be at home for. So there's lots of work. We moved house a couple of years ago. So, like lots of people, just doing lots of, a load of work on the house. I was getting, going out and walking and sort of just actually having, as I said, making the best of a bad situation. And even I had enough work that did come through the year, so there was always something on the horizon. But there really was kind of, I suppose, just the last couple of months has been really tough because there was further cancellations of work, and then I suddenly was looking at another year of mass upheaval, and I'd run out of DIY jobs. I got bored with them, to be honest.
And have most of the projects been rescheduled or shelved? Doing the impact on that side of things.
I think I'm right in saying the cheetah project that we did was one of the only, certainly one of the only wildlife documentaries that was made by the BBC that was delivered on time. We had sort of, the shoot was massively restricted, or the ability to get out there. But there's another series that I was working on called Animals with Cameras, which we did a series 3 years ago, and we got another commission to do another 4 programs. And we just, with that series, it kind of basically had to get shrunk down to 2 programs. And even with that, my involvement in them is kind of going to be sort of pretty minimal, which is a real shame, because there was some amazing stories all around the world, a huge amount of work that had gone into pre-planning this particular series, because there was bespoke cameras that were built to be put on animals, and as sort of one animal kind of was no longer an option, with the production team had to then find another animal, then have the cameras designed, and then that country would then close down. So it was, I suppose, the worst project or worst natural history project for COVID year, because you're having to kind of constantly just work within all these moving parameters.
But you did manage to get away towards the end of last year to Australia. We were seeing some nice pictures on your Instagram of when you were out there. So in terms of the project, can you share with us some of the differences in pre-planning, impact, your timings, other issues? I mean, obviously Australia have been really closed their doors from pretty much day one. So how did this all transpire and come together?
With the Australia trip, the producer had actually left a couple of days ahead of me. So this is back in March. So she had got into Australia before the quarantine came into force. And I think literally 24 hours before I was. And then they said, well, you can go out, but you'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks because you just missed that window. She, in fact, ended up staying out in Australia, and one of the programs, it was just supposed to be a couple of species we're filming out there, but one of the programs, she just stayed out in Australia and did as much as she could. And then the plan was to try and get me out to Australia at some point through the year. But because of how tightly clamped down they were, it was, you know, jumping through hoops and mostly failing at the end. And you had to basically get an exemption from the government to go out. And I think on the third application, and we got a letter from the local authorities and from the scientists to say that the work that we're doing was important for the conservation of these animals. So I did eventually manage to get out there. But as I said, with animals with cameras, so it's working with scientists and putting bespoke cameras on a whole variety of different animals. So what you need sort of to come in, you need the animal behavior to sort of be in line with the scientist availability and sort of my availability sort of as the presenter of the host of the show. And just with all of the different locations, it was a nightmare in the best of times, just trying to line all three things up. But when you actually throw into the mix, you know, just not being able to travel to those countries, it was a real headache. So it was it felt a bit of a miracle in December to get out to Australia. And by that point, I knew I was going to have to spend a full 2 weeks in isolation and quarantine in a hotel. But it was like, well, if that's what we need to do, that's what we got to do.
And what sort of percentage-wise budget impact does that have on the production? If your producer was out there from March, obviously it's additional homestay costs, you quarantining, the crew. Did you use local crew or?
We did. We used local crew in Australia, so there was a lot of money for this particular project. A lot of money that was wasted, not wasted, that was spent designing cameras. So that's like a sort of a minimum of 6 weeks lead-in time to design these cameras from scratch to fit on a bat, or fit on a kangaroo, or fit on a pangolin, and what would happen if that particular country closed down? They'd have to start again. So there's a huge amount of sort of overrun and expenditure on designing the cameras, and then with quarantine period and having to pay people for that time, it obviously had implications, and that's why the BBC kind of eventually got to the position and said, okay, let's just shrink it down from 4 programs down to 2. And I'm not quite sure, but I think they probably spent the budget of 4 programs just to make the 2, which is really, it's really frustrating, because you've got everybody working on the production has envisaged that thing. At the moment that it's actually commissioned and you've got that approval, you start sort of thinking, okay, what's this finished product going to look like? So with all of these shifting sands across the year, you're seeing them being eroded, and it will be an amazing couple of programs, because the whole team's been working really, really hard, but it's not what it should be, sadly.
And when can we expect to see that?
It'll all be done, I think, within the next couple of months. So yeah, it'll be on the kind of one of the few new programs on the shelves of the BBC. So I'm not quite sure when they're going to put it out. Maybe in the sort of middle of the year.
I think we're all desperate to see something new on our screens. I think everybody's finished Netflix and BBC iPlayer by now.
Yeah.
Just returning to the cheetah family that you mentioned previously. As per usual, you get up very close and personal with all of these animals that you film. I just wondered, thinking about technology and talking about building cameras, etc. I mean, you're filming the world's fastest land animal. How do you prepare for something like that in terms of your tech checklist?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of no getting away from the fact that with most natural history shoots, you need a big long lens. So the CN20 is the sort of standard wildlife filming lens these days. I camera wise, I just opted for the Mira for that shoot. Because it's what I'm most used to. It's kind of rugged. I'm just kind of, I'm not very good at remembering all of the different settings of all the various cameras that I might use, whereas the Mira is kind of the camera that I've used the most in recent years. And at the end of the day, when you've got a massive, big, heavy lens, having a fairly heavy camera on the back of it doesn't kind of make much difference. But I had, I knew that with the cheetahs that I was going to be doing lots of walking, probably not that much running that was going to be worth anything when you're following a cheetah. So I just knew there was going to be hours and hours and miles of following these animals. So with the whole setup, with the satchel tripod and the CN20 and the Mira, it was 33 kilos. And then you've got a backpack with kind of extra batteries and water and stuff. So I was humping, maybe a bit just short of 40 kilos about on my back and shoulders. But that said, when you're following an animal like a cheetah, you're so engaged in it, and especially when you can get so close, or as close as we did, the weight of carrying those cameras about wasn't actually. It was kind of I wasn't aware of it until we just had to do some shots where the director said, "Okay, we'll do a shot of you walking through the landscape carrying the camera." I was like, what for? The reward is getting the images of the cheetahs, not just kind of walking to a tree and turning around and coming back.
So we can all feel sorry for you. All looks terribly hard work, Gordon.
Yeah, well, I think anyone that sort of probably saw the program and saw how close I was to those cheetahs would be sort of green with envy, because it's an amazing experience to spend time so close to animals like that. So if a little bit of suffering is only just, I think.
I mean, how close is that? I mean, it's sometimes hard to tell when you're watching. Meters wise, how close do you think you got?
Yeah, to begin with, I mean, it started off quite cautiously just because this female had never been followed on foot before. She was well used to people in vehicles, but she hadn't been, pursued in that way, and we didn't want to change her behavior. So initially, I just kind of got to a point where I could see her and she could see me, and just sort of assess how she was feeling about that. And I suppose for cheetahs, they're kind of so focused on, especially cheetahs with cubs, focused on their next meal. As soon as they realize that I'm not a threat and I'm not interfering sort of with their kind of routine, they just get on with it. So I would have 10 meters for the first sort of few days was sort of a comfortable distance, but when I got back out in October, she was, you could easily get within 2 or 3 meters of her, and she was fine, which sort of, and it sometimes with a big CN20, it's too close. The cheetahs came so close, it was beyond the sort of minimum focusing distance. I had to there's quite a few iPhone shots in that program, so I was like, just whipped out my phone and started filming them.
Wow. And thinking about kit and the weather conditions, terrains that you're working in, I know you mentioned the Amira. Do you have a typical set kit that you take to different terrains? How do you plan for that?
Yeah,
for bears versus cheetahs, polar bears.
I think the only kind of big considerations of, so familiarity with the camera is my kind of big thing. I just like using a camera that I know, and especially something, I like a good rugged camera. It's because on some occasions you might be schlepping through kind of tangled jungle, and, if your camera's kind of a bit too plasticky, things can snag and drop off. But I suppose big considerations for certain projects is light levels, and if you're working sort of very early in the morning or kind of end of day, what we've been finding is sort of the A7S is a good little backup camera, just so if it's too dark to film on the big camera, you can switch to the A7S, which is, they're amazing cameras. Like, it's phenomenal what they can do. and low light.
I mean, while we're on tech, we've had an audience question saying, how much power do you carry with you to power that camera on an average day's shoot, and how many crew are with you?
I kind of, because with the wildlife side of stuff, I don't keep rolling the camera unless there's something interesting happen, because I've got this kind of I think that footage has to be stored somewhere, and it kind of, I suppose the miserly Scot in me thinks, well, that's going to cost somebody money to store, that 30 minutes of or even 30 seconds of a cheetah doing nothing. So I kind of just, and because I started on film and you had to be very aware of when you ran the camera, so I just kind of just never fill a card up in a sort of morning. Yeah, I don't think I've ever filled a whole card up. And normally I'll always try and get good quality new batteries, because obviously you can carry a couple of batteries and that'll do you for a whole sort of half a day session. But if they're kind of old and been around a bit, you might have to carry sort of five or six of them. But yeah, kind of I sort of power the camera down and sort of just try and conserve power, conserve storage, because you never know when you're going to need it. Something might happen, and then if you're out there, it's sort of, you don't want to find that you've only got 30 seconds left on a card, or you're kind of out of batteries. But that's kind of, you learn that through the hard way of actually running out of batteries or running out of film or cards.
Have you ever missed something? I'd imagine by the time you've got lens, camera on, etc., and what you were looking for has disappeared, or have you become so quick now that you can literally get it all together?
I realized very early on when I sort of started filming, after I was an assistant and then I became a cameraman and was filming full time, I kind of realized that you generally miss, not a lot, but you miss maybe 1/3 of the really interesting stuff, because you might be in a vehicle and you're not set up for a kind of vehicle setup, and something just happens very, very quickly, or even something changing a battery. And it's Sod's law, like the moment that you have to change a battery, that's when something will happen. So yeah, generally, if I know that I'm not in a position to film, I will kind of put my blinkers on and not even look in. So if a battery needs changed, I'll turn my back on the animal, because if I don't see it, it hasn't happened. But yeah, kind of it's not as frustrating as it used to be, because I think as I just learned through experience, that kind of happens. There's going to be times, especially if you're walking about carrying a camera. So with the cheetahs, I had the camera set up, switched on most of the time when the cheetah was moving, so that it was just plonk it down. If I had time to level it, and then start filming. But if you're walking for longer distances and you've got a camera in a backpack and you're carrying a tripod, you're talking about 2 minutes minimum to get the camera, everything off and set up. So that is really frustrating, because you could be the whole time. I mean, I remember walking through the forest and bumping into this big chimpanzee, and it sat down and was just sort of pulled off a long stick and then started sort of fishing for termites. And I'm just watching this happen. I'm very slowly taking off my backpack, and I couldn't move quickly, and they get the camera out, and knowing full well that the moment that the camera was up to speed, it was just going to bugger off. And sure enough, sort of hit record, and it just disappeared off the path. But yeah, it goes with the territory. But you kind of need to be as ready as you can be at any time.
I mean, technology has changed considerably in the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, what things have revolutionised your job and helped you, and what else do you need? What would you like people to invent?
I'd like people to invent a much lighter camera. That would be nice, because it does, especially if you're walking for long distances, it kind of it is tough and you get tired, especially if you're walking through a rainforest for 8 hours just carrying stuff. So that would be nice. Lighter cameras, but with the same sort of, you know, the focal length of something like the CN20s kind of is pretty amazing. On the most basic sort of tech sort of revolution for me has been pre-roll's been around for, you know, for ages, but having pre-roll on a camera that you can just have it on an 8-second or 12-second sort of loop that for wild animals is amazing, because in the past, shooting on film, you think, okay, I think it's that bird's about to fly or that animal's about to get up, so you just keep on running and costing, you know, hundreds of pounds over every few days just on shots that you're never going to use. But with pre-roll, you wait for, you know, lock the camera off and just sort of keep an eye on it, and then even if you're sort of 5 seconds too late, you hit the button and you've recorded that. But with, you know, camera traps is another thing, and camera trap technology was sort of kind of got a bit sort of, it stagnated for a while, and we've been using camera traps for those Lost Land series for quite a long time, and they hadn't really ever moved on. And especially as camera technology had moved on in people's phones and with DSLRs, camera traps just, it was like they were awful. But now there's a new generation of camera traps that are really good, sort of high quality and much clearer. Low light filming, you know, things like the A7S that you could film in, you know, in conditions where in the past you'd have needed an infrared camera and infrared lights. So yeah, that's sort of something that's opened up a kind of nighttime world in a really big way. And drone technology is something that's really kind of been amazing for every production, because, you know, not that long ago, maybe kind of within the last 10 years, if you had the money for Cineflex and helicopter time, you could make your production look really glossy, and that was kind of separated sort of the men from the boys when it came to sort of, you know, the caliber of programs. So there's some of the programs that we worked on that just didn't have the budget for helicopter, and you're talking tens of thousands of pounds. Whereas with drones, for, you know, 1,500 quid, you can have a little Mavic flying about getting these amazing shots and just keep on shooting, and it doesn't cost, you know, hardly anything. So there's a lot more gloss to even low budget programs. And you see some of the sort of self-funded little films that people are making, or wildlife films that I see that people send me, the production values are sort of through the roof, because people are using sort of, you know, affordable gimbals, people are using drones, people are using top quality cameras. So, you know, for anyone starting out in wildlife or filmmaking, you know, for, you know, relatively little or comparatively little money, you can make, you know, a really impressive film.
Do you have your drone's pilot license?
I do, yeah, but I just found out yesterday that it's expired. I didn't realize it did expire, but yeah, I do have that.
Do you take one out on shoots when you're?
From a lot of the projects that I'm involved in, we'll have somebody, because they're mostly kind of filming me in that environment. But yeah, I'll always, that's something that I'll always take with me. If you're allowed to use them in the area that, you know, that we're working, even just for doing these kind of time lapses. So, you know, being able to kind of fire a drone up and get a sunset time lapse at kind of, you know, 100 meters up. It just opens up another sort of dimension to wherever you are. And, you know, for a lot of places, we were doing the elephant series a few years ago, and the elephants were amazing, but the habitat that they lived in wasn't that impressive. It was really flat and scrubby. There were some kind of rocky outcrops, but on the ground, you really couldn't, you know, it didn't look that impressive. But with a drone, suddenly it gave you that kind of a whole kind of new dimension, and just kind of, I suppose, better conveys that area, because you are so, you know, you're limited just having a camera on a tripod, and it just feels so outdated now. I did something not that long ago when we weren't allowed drones, and I was having to, you know, do like a pan across a landscape, and I felt that I'd gone back to the 80s. It's like, you don't use pans across the landscape, but that's all we
allowed.
could do.
We've got loads of questions coming in for you, as I thought we might do. So I'll just go to a couple of those. Going forward, how do you expect the changes this past year has brought to affect natural history filmmaking going forward? Now, we have got a natural history panel at midday today talking about the impact of COVID on the industry as a whole, the good and the bad. So what would be your takeouts from that?
I mean, this is a good time for any kind of young camera person that's making that transition into sort of being a fully fledged cameraman. Look, I kind of basically got my wings back in the 90s because there was a boom time back then when there was lots of stuff being made. All of the established camera people were busy. So sort of interlopers like me managed to kind of sort of sneak in at the bottom. And it seems at the moment there's just, basically not much happening for the past year. So there's a bit of a kind of gold rush, it seems, of productions looking for camera people. Because I've had lots of phone calls in the last sort of month of people looking just for me to do camera work. There seems to be there is a lot going on, and you've got sort of the SVODs, producing natural history. My only worry is that there's going to be, oversaturation of natural history, and that the stories might start getting a bit repetitive, and then everyone's going to decide, okay, we're just going to leave that for a bit. Sort of, that's the trouble with natural history. It's trying to find new ways to tell the same stories. And, there's still lots of stuff that hasn't been filmed before. And with the recent Perfect Planet, that was really good. There was stuff I thought that's really innovative. The storytelling was great. But, if there's so much work and so many channels wanting natural history content, inevitably people are going to switch on their televisions or open up their screens and say, I think I've seen this before. That's my concern.
I mean, your Animal Family and Me series has been phenomenal, really popular. In our house, we'd like you to do pandas, please. What's next for the Animal Family and Me series? Where are you off to?
Pandas? No, not pandas. No, what they are one of the animals that we really do want to do, but it's kind of logistically it's quite tricky. We've got another one that we're hoping will be commissioned for this year. I don't want to jinx it because it hasn't been fully commissioned yet, but it's something big with whiskers. But we're kind of running out of. We've done a lot of those big animals for that sort of strand. So I'd love to be able to film something like, I think Wolverine are super cool animals, and you could, if you had the right access or the right animal character, you could make a really engaging few programs on something small. It doesn't have to be those big predators or big animals. But yeah, I think kind of there's still a couple of big cats that I haven't done. But with the animal family strand, it's all about finding those individuals that you can get close enough to so that it is a more immersive experience, and it's me being able to follow that same individual over the course of a year. But there's still quite a few animals we can hopefully do it with, and they're going to engage. I think maybe I could maybe be able to see my career out, and then I'll kind of run out of everything, and then it might be kind of the foxes in my garden. And saying that, I filmed foxes for Springwatch years and years and years ago, and people still to this day, so you're not going to film the foxes again? So you can. It's all about the story, I suppose.
Well, I have an 8-year-old volunteer if you do pandas.
Can he carry an Amira?
No, she's very good at whining. So if you want one of those, you can have one of those. I think we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I'd like to ask, conservation and preservation of our planet, and we mentioned Perfect Planet a minute ago. I mean, the theme of Perfect Planet was very obvious. We need to do something now. We need to take action. And it feels like thinking about my children, everyone with younger children, the pressure is very much on the younger generation to fix, try and resolve some of these big issues. When you meet young people and hear from young people, do you feel they're more passionate about conservation and preserving our planet than ever, or do you feel hopeful?
Yeah, I do. I think they are more passionate and more aware, and I am, because of that, I am more hopeful. I was thinking about this recently, you know, sort of growing, I kind of grew up through the sort of 80s, and back then, you know, the sort of, you know, if you were to ask, you know, a sort of 13-year-old me or 10-year-old me, what really worries you? You know, it was, you know, nuclear apocalypse. That was kind of what, you know, a big fear was back sort of in this sort of through, I suppose, through the 70s and 80s. Whereas if you were to ask, you know, most kids, most young adults, teenagers now, what their biggest fear is, it's for, you know, the future of the planet. So I feel kind of guilty that we're passing on a whole lot of complex issues, a kind of planet that's you know, not quite broken, that's fundamentally broken. But I think, you know, it takes a kind of generational shift for people to be really fully aware of what the problems are and what needs to be done. And, you know, there's an amazing book, actually. It's called Hope in Hell by Jonathan Porritt that I've been reading recently. And a lot of the problems that we're facing right now, the solutions exist. So it's not as if we're going to have to, you know, wait forever for new technology to be invented to sort some of these problems. It's actually just the will of the people, and for people to wake up and realize that the priority shouldn't be, you know, consumerism and capitalism and sort of growth at all costs. And we live, you know, we sort of I grew up through the 80s, you know, growth at all costs was what the planet was about. And now, you know, sort of hopefully for young people, it's actually saving the planet. That's what it's all about. And, you know, the money in your pocket and, you know, your sort of new widescreen TV or your car outside your house, that's kind of pretty irrelevant, you know, in comparison to these bigger issues.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. I know that we love watching what you do, and we love everything the Natural History Unit does as well. It's so important to keep us informed about how the planet's evolving, how animals are doing, surviving, if they're still around. It's really a pleasure to see you on our screens, Gordon, and I really can't thank you enough for being and taking time out today, and we wish you well on your next adventures. What's the boarding pass going to say? Can you even say that?
I think I have a visa at the Rwandan embassy in London at the moment, so I'm touch wood, heading to Rwanda in just a couple of weeks to film what I might not be able to say, but they're big and hairy.
Is Boris out there? Brilliant. Well, thank you very much again for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please stay safe and well, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Cheers.